The Media Training and Publicity Workshop was presented on October 9th via Zoom. Representatives from nonprofits and community organizations learned about how to work with the media to get their stories spotlighted on radio, TV, print, and on podcast. We had an illustrious panel who had plenty to share. The keys to getting media exposure through the Media Training and Publicity Workshop. It was facilitated by Kevin P. Henry from KPH Media. Here's that panel discussion.
Day to day.
Sorry about that.
So my day to day looks like coordinating web coverage across different teams, seeing who's covering what, and working with. So I don't supervise people directly. Nobody reports to me directly, but I'm basically wrangling and coordinating across teams in the newsroom to make sure that things that we want for the day get online. And I'm also editing things each day. I'm giving everything from a light copy edit to a real line edit to folks before their stories get online. And, my team is a team of, I think, 6 people, and we do a lot for a small team, and we kind of do it all. So that means sometimes I'm also doing reporting as well. So a little bit of everything is in there. And the reason I got into journalism, I thought I was going to be a music teacher, but I became a journalist instead because I realized that I really liked the idea of being able to have a voice in this landscape, because I think representation is a big issue, and also just there are so many there were so many things that I saw that I thought could be improved in the industry, that I wanted to be a part of making a change in. And so, yeah, I'll stop yapping now.
Okay, well, and you're also a member, like myself and Jerry and Lee, is of the Seattle Association of Black Journalists as well. And before we leave, we can touch on the event coming up on I think it's October 21st, is it? I think?
Yeah.
Which is called Black Voices Matter, which, it's super important for a number of reasons, but also I know that when I first got my job in the city of Bellevue in '94, they were talking about doing outreach. We want to do outreach to diverse communities. Our region is changing, et cetera, et cetera. I said, great, let me see your media list. The media list then was King, Como, and Cairo, the Seattle Times, and the PI. That was it. All the releases went to those publications. I said, well, that's about maybe 20% of the total media that's out there. And then fortunately they got wise, and now it's much more expansive of a list. Let's go over to Rosette and hear about who you are and the South Seattle Emerald publication.
Sure. Hello. My name's Rosette Royale. My pronouns are he, she, they. I am the managing editor of the South Seattle Emerald. South Seattle Emerald amplifies the authentic narratives of South Seattle. It's South Seattle, but it's also South King County as well. I'm pretty new to the Emerald. I haven't even been there 2 months yet, but I have worked as a journalist. I had my first job in journalism in 1991 when I was living on the East Coast in Cape Cod, writing for a weekly summer publication, and did that, worked at a newspaper on Cape Cod, freelance work, and for 10 years, I worked as a writer and editor for Real Change newspaper in Seattle, which is a paper which is sold by unhoused and low-income folks. And so South Seattle Emerald is a BIPOC-led organization. And so we write stories about Black and brown folks, and most of those stories are written by Black and brown folks. And, really, the South Seattle Emerald exists to, as we said, amplify the narratives that are often overlooked, unheard. And, I used to work, as I said, for Real Change, and sometimes people would say, oh, giving voice to the voiceless. But then I thought that's actually not true, because people have voices. We all have a voice. And that's what the South Seattle Emerald tries to do, is to make sure that people's voices are heard and amplifying those voices. And in my job, I work with assigning editors. There are 4 of them, development team, web team, and I also do editing, help to manage the budget, put together a strategic framework, which we're doing right now. So I have my hands in a lot of different things. And like I said, I just started, so I haven't written yet for the Emerald, but I'm sure that day is coming. Look forward to it.
Oh my God, fine.
Absolutely. Well, just one other question. So it's South Seattle Emerald. Is there a certain territory in terms of the stories that you cover, in terms of the area, the region?
Sure. So, we are here in South Seattle. I should say that we're a fully remote organization. So everything is virtual that happens. But Burien, Kent, Auburn, Des Moines, those are all included. Even places that you may not think might really be touched in the South Seattle or South King County region. We still will feature stories, coverage from those areas, because we believe that as people get displaced, economic displacement happens in Seattle, particularly with Black and brown folks, that we want to make sure that even though they might not be centered in the city, that their voices still matter to the city, and helping to send those voices out in any way that we possibly can.
Okay. Yeah, that is very, very helpful. Thank you. Let's go over to Jerry Brewer. What's up?
Good
Jerry?
afternoon. I'm Jerry Brewer. I'm a sports columnist, a national sports columnist at the Washington Post. My job is to roam the country and find things about sports that I want to write opinions about, and also feature stories that I want to tell. In addition, I'm starting, as people will find out in 2024, to broaden my reach and write more about culture and society and race and some other things. As a matter of fact, I was just in Central Appalachia the past few days and just got back last night. So really interested to tackle bigger things. But for me, I was at the Seattle Times until 2015 for 9 years. Got my cat here.
Yeah, your agent.
Bugging the hell out of me right now. I've worked in Philadelphia, Orlando, Louisville, Kentucky as well. And to be truthful, like, journalism is all I ever wanted to do. I've never had a job outside of journalism. I've only had one job that wasn't working for a newspaper, and that was when I did radio in Seattle while I was writing a newspaper column. For me, it's what I knew I wanted to do almost 30 years ago when I was age 16. And I've just been on a mission to do this ever since. I'm a big believer in what Philip Graham, formerly, who was the president and publisher of the Washington Post, something he said back in 1963, journalism is the first rough draft of history. And I think those words rough are sometimes appropriate. We're truth tellers. Doesn't mean we always get it right. We try to be as accurate as we can be. And the biggest thing I want to talk about as we go forward today is just the relational aspect of this. I think too much it has become transactional relationships, and that is what is getting in the way between public relations and journalism. And so if we can break down that wall and get back to what it should be, which is about relationships, I think it will enrich both sides.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I'm really happy to hear that you are kind of branching out into some other areas, and that's relationships. Because so many times, I mean, like right now, if I was in a community organization, I might not have a story that you're going to cover, but a year from now, I might be in a position to give you some information or set up interviews, because now I'm in a certain area that you're covering now. So I think I really encourage people, even if you don't have a story right now, just reach out to a reporter. Just say, hey, this is who I am. Here's my card, send them some information, because so often I've met a reporter or I've met an editor or, a TV person or something. And it was 6 months later or a year later, even, that because we stayed in touch, they contacted me first for something. So that whole relationship, and even after a story, I know it's keep it professional, but at the same time, it's okay after Jerry covers your story or Liz covers the story to reach out and just say, hey, I just want to tell you about this other thing you might be interested in, because those relationships can really be a good foundation for future collaborations. Wanted to go over to Julie Loken, who's going to introduce us to the world of podcasting, which is I don't know how new it is anymore. How new is it, Julie?
I think it is 17 years old.
Okay.
I mean, early 2000. So it's been around a while, Kevin. And I'm so grateful for Kevin because he is actually the voice of one of my podcasts. So he does the intro and outro to one of my podcasts. So
Thank you.
as you can tell, his voice is beautiful. So I could just introduce myself really quickly. My name is Julie Loken. I am a storyteller, and that is really what I am. I didn't really recognize it until, my 40s. I went to school for journalism. I went to law school. I was trying to do all the things, but really, truly at my core, it was about storytelling. So I started a business called the Media Casters. It is a platform to elevate voices of people and businesses who are looking to brand and tell their story in a curated way and really, really attached to their audience, connect with their audience, understand their audience. And that's why I love podcasting. This is why Kevin brought me on. I do write. I write for Entrepreneur Magazine. I write for Brains Magazine. I write for Mind Valley. Also, I've written 4 books, but really podcasting is so fun because it's a free form in which you can engage in such powerful conversations. So I think if you are thinking about starting a podcast, do it, because it is an amazing marketing arm. It's a great way to kind of establish your expertise in what you do. Or if you want to be a guest on a podcast, that's even better because you don't have to do anything except really show up and share another message, the message of the podcast that you're on. So it is just a powerful platform. It really democratizes our voices in terms of it's easy to do. It's not easy. I shouldn't say it's easy, but it's not difficult to do. And it can give you a platform to reach corners of the earth that you never thought you could reach. And that's why I am obsessed with podcasting. And that's the name of one of my podcasts it's called Obsessed. So thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you guys. And I'm so happy to just have an amazing conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned something about being able to kind of have deeper conversations. And one of the things we'll talk about today are the different formats, because in a podcast format, you have the time to go into detail and have a conversation, and as a guest, process things as you're, as you're being interviewed. But conversely, if Como 1000 calls you and says, look, we want to get you, this happened to me a few times, we want to get you on the air in the next 10 minutes, and we have 1 minute and 25 seconds for you to tell your story. So you've got to be able to, I always tell people, work on their elevator speech and have about 5 different versions of it. The minute one, the 5-minute one, maybe 20-minute one, or the sit down, have several cups of coffee one. So each format is different, but again, it's about preparation and being able to pivot. But if you know what you're talking about, then it should be relatively easy. But just be aware of these different mediums and these different formats. Last but not least, from KBCS FM 91.3, a world of music and ideas, is Yuko Kodama. Tell us all about KBCS FM 91.3. Public affairs specifically.
As you can tell, Kevin has hosted on KBCS. He has had decades of relationship
You
with.
make me sound very old now. Since I was a small
both
child.
both of us. Anyway, So KBCS is a non-commercial, listener-supported public radio station, and it is community radio. It is housed at the campus of Bellevue College, and it's a service of Bellevue College. And it was born in 1973. It was started because a group of students had a sit-in after they requested for a radio station. They were denied. They had a sit-in in the president's office. You can imagine in 1973 the kinds of things that were going on in our country, and they felt the need for other for their voices to be heard, for other stories to be heard, as well as have lots of music. And they were granted a radio station. So it is it was a low wattage, student run, educational radio station, and now it is a professionally run, brings in it prioritizes education and access. So we train citizen reporters, journalists. We train people in broadcasting and hosting music shows. And a number of our students have moved on to KUOW and Slate and IEEE Spectrum and other media outlets. So we are a mission-driven media that is about education, access, and helping get the stories out there that aren't always featured in mainstream media and other outlets. We also have 5 hours of news programming, including our own locally produced program, The Grit, at 7 in the morning on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And it's an hour-long program, and so we also feature our own local stories. Our stories tend to, because we have the flexibility of our own schedule, and we are able to, have interviews that are longer, whether they're 3 minutes long to 20 minutes long to 50 minutes long, we have more time for that. And we're able to, give people the time to be able to tell their story. So that is KBCS. We also, our reach goes down south past Federal Way now, out to Bremerton, east to, in the foothills of the Cascades, North Bend, and Monroe. So that's our kind of our geographic reach. We hit all of King County and parts of Pierce and Skagit County. And let's see, did I catch everything? And yeah, I would say that for myself, I've been in radio since 1992. And I started off in commercial radio in Japan. So I used to help produce a program that was actually, it was considered the #1 morning show in Tokyo. It was a really fun show that was that included an interview every morning, and it was kind of the highlight, the most popular portion of that show, where the host called overseas and interviewed someone in English for like 10 minutes, and then he would summarize what was said into Japanese. It was a really hot show and hot portion of the show. And so I did pre-interviews for them, and then I became their North American and South American correspondent for 10 years after I left Japan, and was based in Seattle. And then over time, I came over to KBCS and started teaching broadcast audio production. So I love editing. I do a lot of editing, and learned lots more at KBCS and have just kind of stuck around since. So now I'm the news director, and I love, working with the community and working with students to help them, learn about different ways to put your story out in audio storytelling.
That's
That's
great. And you touched on a couple of things I just wanted to kind of throw out there that we can probably go into more detail during this workshop. But you mentioned relationships, and Jerry brought that up, and some other people have kind of brought that up, is that when I worked at the city of Bellevue, I started as the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion person in '94, when it was just the D then. It didn't have the E and the I and the B and all the other letters. So it's kind of a new idea. But when I was at the city, they were saying, well, we're going to have these town halls, and we're going to have these meetings where we hear from all these different voices, which was great. I said, but what about if we took the same concept and we put it on the radio? So now, instead of reaching 200 people in a meeting, we're reaching 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people. And then you can archive it, stick it on the website, so people can always go back and listen and hear these voices. And so we started, it must have been a 7 or 8 year partnership with KBCS, where we provided a show called Voices of Diversity. And that was a show that I started off hosting, but then ultimately I handed it over to volunteers who then received that valuable training. And these are volunteers from very diverse backgrounds. And that's so important. And that's one of the missions of the Seattle Association of Black Journalists, is there's such a shortage of voices of color in the media. I don't know what the stat is in the newsroom. I think, 5%, 8% or whatever, depending on the market. But in order to report stories with equity and with fairness, a lot of times you need to hear from the voices of the people that you're talking about. So I would really encourage nonprofits here to talk to Bellevue College, or even, I know KSCR FM is up in Snohomish County, that a lot of times they're looking for guests, they're looking for partnerships, they're looking for interns. And again, these relationships, you and I have known each other, 15 years now, and we're still working together. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah.
Before we kind of get into the nuts and the bolts here of and talking to individual panelists about their specific medium, I'm going to, I always say, attempt to share my screen, because I wanted to show a video, and it's just to set this up. I'm on the board of the Organization of Prostitution Survivors, and we have a couple of board members on here, I believe Sasha and Rebecca. And what I'm going to show you is a 2.5-minute clip from Cairo in January. It was that was Sex Trafficking Awareness Month. And that's another thing, is when you're pitching a story, try and tie it to a larger story. So if we're an anti-sex trafficking organization, that's a great time to do a story, is in January. Not that, you can do it anytime, but that's when there's more of a focus on a particular issue. So Cairo, after I sent out a press release, was nice enough to show up at an event we were having. So let me see if I can cue that up. Bear with me here for a second. And then please, somebody verbally tell me if they can't hear, or there's some kind of technical issue. Okay.
Organization of Prostitution Survivors is holding an awareness event in the Aurora neighborhood. Kyber 7's Jake Chapman is live there right now at Black Coffee in Northwest Shoreline, where things are underway. And Jake, we can see there is a pretty good sized crowd behind you now.
And Didi, this crowd just continues to grow as many people want to raise awareness about this subject. I'm joined by the president of Ops right now, Rebecca Fonda. Rebecca, thank you for joining us. Just tell me, what is the purpose of tonight? What's going on here? What can people expect?
Yeah, so tonight we are hosting an event called Together We Rise. So on National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, we're coming together with community to educate, them on human trafficking, how this happens, it's happening in our community, and the work that OPS is doing to support the survivors in our community.
In your organization, 80% of the people in it are survivors. How important is it to have people who have survived something like this, to have this outreach, to reach out to people to show them that there is a way out? How important is that?
It is extremely important so that when, a participant walks in the door and has experienced something like a trafficking situation, that they're met with someone who has gone through something similar to what they have, so that they're able to walk with them and that they know that they're not alone in this.
And how long is tonight going on? It just started moments ago. What else can we see tonight? We see a video going on right now from the co-founder of this organization. What else can people expect tonight?
We have dance, we have a step team coming on tonight, we have poetry from our participants, we have the staff at OPS getting up and talking about the work that they do, we are introducing our board, and we're doing a human trafficking presentation as well.
And just this conversation, this is a tough conversation, but as you just said, this impacts the Pacific Northwest, the country, the world. How important is it to have this conversation, to know that this is an issue not only here, but everywhere?
People need to understand that human trafficking is happening within our area. This isn't something that happens just in other countries. This is happening here, and it is impacting our communities. So this conversation is extremely important to have, and for people to really understand who this is affecting, how they can make a difference, and how organizations like ours can support the community.
And Rebecca, thank you so much for joining. We'll let you get back to this. I know a busy night for you guys ahead. Thank you so much. And we'll have another breakdown of this event coming up for you guys in the next hour. Dee Dee, I'll send it back to you.
Were reported.
Could everybody hear and see that okay? Somebody say yes. Okay, I got a couple of thumbs up there. Great. Okay, so I wanted to talk about what you just saw. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can save them until the last half hour when we'll have a Q&A. But I think that example, and by the way, Rebecca, who's here on the call, I think, is actually the board president, not the president, which kind of is one of those things where sometimes I've been mistitled sometimes. So just pay extra attention when you're handing cards to the reporters and stuff, because a lot of times they're in a hurry. But I think this is a great example of how an organization that has a worthy cause, it partners. We partnered with Black Coffee, which now has a outlet in the CD, but was up in Shoreline. So we partnered with them. They provided the sound system, the facilities. They also even had entertainment. Throughout that event, we heard from survivors of prostitution. It was an organization that just really, it went from, okay, we want to introduce the new executive director, Rakina Perry, to our crowd, but how can we build on that and expand on that and magnify it? And I really appreciate what the reporter did, Jake. Jake was out there on the 11 o'clock news doing a live on Aurora Avenue after the event had been over for 2 hours, still reporting about it. And the thing that's nice is that happened almost, well, in January. We can still use that. That's on the OPS website. You can use it as an example. You can use it in a training. So that's just one example of how you can take media and you can work with them. And the thing that's great about Rebecca, and as I said, what I encourage you to do is have your elevator speech. I mean, that was 2 minutes and 43 seconds. So you've got to be able to hit the major points in 2 minutes, 1 minute, 3 minutes. And she did a great job. So I would even suggest having media trainings, it doesn't have to be a big, heavy thing, but at your organizations, because sometimes the receptionist can be sitting there and all of a sudden a news crew shows up at your organization. You have to have a strategy and a plan in place, because if you don't, it's a missed opportunity. But sometimes if there's nobody to talk to the media about, especially if there's some controversy associated to an issue, it's not a good look, because then it's like, oh, well, we showed up and nobody would talk to us. So those are some things to think about. before we get to Q&A, I wanted to kind of narrow down some questions about with specific panelists here. And I wanted to start with Jerry, because I know, Jerry, you're a sports columnist, but when I was growing up, that sounds so bad. When I was in journalism class in college, that was before the internet. So we were told, be objective, keep yourself out of it. If you want to express your opinion, that's an editorial. Now, the columnists was something that was kind of an interesting offshoot of just your standard news, because I remember I worked with a guy named Jerry Large a couple times with the Seattle Times, and I'd been contracted to do a series of prostate cancer awareness workshops targeting African-American men. This is back in, I don't know, 2008 or 9. And I said, wow, first of all, it's hard to get men to talk about things like that. I finally managed to get the biggest crowd. I partnered with it was like a nightclub, bar, restaurant in the Central District, who said, hey, every Friday, there's like 40, 50 Black guys hanging out here. And if I'll supply the food, you want to come in and do your workshop, you can do it. So I wound up talking about prostate cancer at a happy hour at a bar in the CD, and Jerry Large came down and wrote like a first person account of the whole experience from the moment he got out of the car and walked through the door. He said, starting off with a line like, I never thought I'd be talking about cancer at a happy hour, in between, a bucket of chicken and a light beer. So I say this just to say that think out of the box sometimes. It's like, be unique, because people talk about cancer all the time, which they should, but think of a way to add a twist to it. How can I get my particular event the attention? Oh, it's unique to talk about cancer at a happy hour. But I'd like to get your thoughts, Jerry, just as a columnist, what kind of stories are you looking for, whether they be sports or just news?
Well, I think you're trying to make sense of your community if you're a local columnist, or the entire country if you're a national columnist. And so that is one place where causes and journalism can kind of come together, right? Like sometimes it's hard, I think, just to make it into the general news cycle, which is just this crazy diet of a lot of different things, right? You got to find your journalists in a sense when you're trying to pitch something. Find the people who are going to be attentive to your organization, to your cause. And a lot of that's like paying attention to what people write about, what people talk about, what they stand for, having kind of a general understanding there, so that when you approach them, that they're going to be more amenable to hearing you out. And, from the standpoint of just columnists, right? Like we're opinion writers, but we're not op-ed writers, right? Like, so it's not going to be political based as much as it's going to be societal. So anything that's going on in society is kind of in our realm. And if you can find something that is going to be interesting to that particular person, but speaks to a greater, something greater about the community as its own microcosm, I think that's always appealing to columnists. And it's funny that you mentioned Jerry Large, because, for a long time, it's Jerry Brewer was a sports columnist. Jerry Large was a Metro columnist. And I got all of Jerry Large's pitches, and Jerry Large got all of my pitches. And we always, every couple of weeks, had to say, you need to talk to so-and-so, or I'm forwarding you this email. Like that. There weren't many weeks that didn't go by when we didn't have those conversations. But that's kind of just the gist of it. And it goes back to that thing again. It's relational, and journalists are not always going to want to cover your event straight up like you'd like them to cover it. Like, so we're not always in the business of publicity, depending on which media organization you go to. But from the standpoint of understanding what it's like for people to live a life in your city and why this is important. There are dozens of journalists who are interested in that. And sometimes you have to kind of get out of the transaction of, I want them to cover this, and get in the mode of, I want them to understand that this is a great resource for them when they're writing about these issues. And so a lot of times I'll talk to people, and I don't necessarily want to write the story that they are pitching, but I do care about their cause. And so we reverse engineer it and say, well, this is how this might meet my interest and your interest align. And this is how we can get together on this and serve us both.
Well, yeah, that's wonderful. And just some other tips I would just throw out is don't, after a reporter hangs up the phone or you get off the Zoom call or they get in their car and drive away, don't call them up and ask them, oh, can I see the story? Or, I'm sorry I said that. Would you take that out? That kind of thing. Because, and just stay away from, well, off the record, Jerry, let me tell you what's really going on, that kind of thing, because that can come back to bite you. And I always tell people, if you want a story covered a certain way or something said a certain way, that's called paid advertising. That's where you pay, and you can write the ad and then you just can pay for it too. So I wanted to go over to Liz to, I had a question about radio, because recently I had there's an event happening here in Everett, actually, on October 26th, Leslie. It's a conference. It's all about kind of, educating people about hate and extremism in the Northwest. And will be happy if anybody's interested to send you the flyer, the information on that. But more to the point, when I contacted you, Liz, you referred me to a reporter who covers particular types of beat. So if somebody says, oh, I would really like to get this KUOW, it'd be great if they would cover it. Is it best to send the release to you, to the news editor at KUOW, or find the specific reporter perhaps that covers certain things and send it to them? And can you send multiple releases, or how would somebody handle that?
Yeah, those are great questions. So I'm a fan of specifically hunting down the person who seems to be the person more apt to cover something like that. So if I were going to pitch a publication about a certain issue that falls within a certain topic, I would find out who covers that beat and who's their editor. And I think it's cool to send, I would start with the reporter, and then maybe if you don't hear anything back from the reporter, maybe pitch their section editor. But I recommend taking that approach because, to be honest, my inbox is in shambles 24/7. And most of my work is I'm hands-on with reporters kind of after they've already been assigned something. I might assign something, but usually they've already been assigned something by the time it comes to me. So personally, I'm not really in the business of assigning stories. And so I think but I also, just having been a reporter, I think you're more likely to get a response from a reporter about covering something than an editor who's trying to wrangle a bunch of things during the day. And I also would say, I think it's super important to know the audience of the publication, and not just the publication broadly, but also its different divisions. So, if you're going to pitch something for, let's say you wanted to pitch a segment for one of our shows, I would do some research and see what kind of stuff does this show usually cover? Does it seem to fall within the realm of topics and issues that they talk about regularly? And just going the extra mile to do that research, I think, can be the difference between having your pitch kind of disappear into the void versus being acknowledged.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about releases in just a few minutes, but I wanted to go over to Rosette about deadlines, because I used to tell people, look, if you know something's going to happen, the sooner you can get it out to the publications, like sometimes several weeks ahead of time, it's important, because some deadlines are very tight in that, well, I should say it this way, there's a longer lead time. So if you're, for instance, magazines, for instance, might be coming out once a month, which means their deadline is 6, 7, 8 weeks before the issue actually comes out. So don't call the magazine a week before it's supposed to come out and say, oh, I'd really like to get this in your magazine. And as well, we're already putting that issue to bed. Now, if you're calling Cairo TV, they might be able to come out the next day if something's happening, because they're every day and they're more spontaneous that way. But with the South Seattle Emerald, Rosette, what kind of deadlines do you have? If I got something going on in the South End, and I think it would be a great story for the Emerald, how should they approach you in dealing with deadlines?
This is a great question. We are talking a lot about deadlines. At the Emerald, we have a small number of writers. We have some contract writers, and we also have a lot of freelance writers. Sometimes these writers are working for us and they have other jobs. They have, families. And so we can't necessarily, it's tough for us to get a pitch on a Monday about something that's happening on a Wednesday, because we may not be able to marshal the resources to get someone to cover that event by that Wednesday. So great lead time is fantastic, right? So that's really helpful for us. So our deadlines are really, staggered by, oh, we know that there's this arts event that's coming up. Oh, there's this debate that's happening between city council members. Oh, that might be something to cover. Let's make sure we have someone on that. And also, our reporters, I know we're in this age where sometimes reporters are also multimedia experts too, right? So they go out with their camera, they go out with their video, they're filming things, they're recording things. And many of the people who work at the Emerald may be sort of new to journalism. I think that's one of the great things about the Emerald, is that sometimes it's a place for people to come when they're looking to start, right? I think, like, you heard stories already of people like, oh, I started here. Well, I started at this small summer publication on Cape Cod like 30 years ago, right? So everyone needs a place to start. And so that starting is really important and can lead to someone doing really great work as they get that experience, right? Well, I think that's the same thing with deadlines too, right? Is that you're sort of learning, like, oh, here's when you need to reach out for something that's happening in 2 weeks. Here's when you need to reach out for something that's happening in a month, right? So it's like we're all kind of learning together, getting our experience, getting our, I don't want to say feet wet. That's so cliche. That's the last thing you want to say as an
Around
editor,
Seattle,
right?
it might be appropriate.
Certainly as the rains come. But, it's really like an opportunity for us to learn together. And I think that's one of the things that the Emerald really takes pride in, is that we're all learning together as a community how to share what we need to share with each other.
Thank you. And Joy Stevens mentioned HALO, which I forget what it stands for, but it's I think you can log on to it and get notices about reporters all over the country, maybe all over.
Haro, help a reporter out.
Yes, thank you. In fact, that's a perfect transition. Do you know about that, Julie? Because you could elaborate on that, and I was going to go to you next anyway. So,
oh, it's my turn. No,
it's your turn.
I heard HALO, but it's help a reporter out. A lot of my clients, a lot of people I know use it. And I don't know if you've heard of it. I don't want to speak on and on about it, but you create a profile. So and you really create a reason why reporters, like if we're doing a story on sex trafficking and I'm looking through all the resources on HARO, help a reporter out, then if I find you, I'll reach out to you. And then that creates more exposure for you and your story and your cause by, being on even a quote. And I got to tell you one other tip that I don't know if a lot of people know. If you are on Twitter, a lot of journalists live on Twitter or use Twitter a lot. Use the hashtag journo requests. This is where a lot of journalists look. You can even check out that hashtag journo requests, JOURNO NO requests. And a lot of journalists look to that on that hashtag to have you as a specific expert, or they're looking for experts just like you. And it's super vibrant, that hashtag on Twitter. So,
That's
and then
great.
muckrack. I also put muckrack over here, but I can add that too in the chat. So
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And if you want to add, anyone wants to add their emails in there for, continuous contact, further contact, that kind of thing would be great. But I wanted to ask you about being a guest on a podcast, because I've been in plenty of your meetings over the years, Julie, and sometimes we've talked about, oh, you should have seen or heard the guest I had last week, or things like that. What are some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to being an effective and great interview, especially given the fact that you have some time, you have 20 minutes, you have a half an hour sometimes. So what are some of Julie's do's and don'ts?
don't pitch me. Number one. So when you guys were talking about elevator pitches, and I totally understood it, if you're being interviewed on TV, you need to know what you're talking about. But if you're on a podcast, typically nobody wants to hear a pitch or an elevator pitch. I want to know your story. And it might not, I'm just going to use sex trafficking just because that's the example that Kevin gave us. But you have a story about sex trafficking, or you have a sports story. I want to hear like the story behind the story. If you are on a reputable, oh, they're hugging goodbye. That's so cute. If you are on a reputable podcast, and I'm going to give you a tip to look for reputable podcasts, they will share all your information in the show notes. They'll mention it. You don't need to pitch yourself at all. It needs to be an organic conversation story that will engage their listeners. You need to understand their listeners. You need to understand the audience that they court. And the thing is if you're on a podcast, you are talking to their whole entire audience. You are getting that privilege to talk to their whole entire audience. So another thing, when the podcast does come out, make sure you share it with your audience as just to reciprocate. That is the good manners for a podcast guest. Now, if you are looking to be on podcasts, what I want you to do is go onto Listen Notes. It's a website, listennotes.com. You can research podcasts, and then you can see where they're ranked globally. So if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. But a lot of podcasters just start a podcast, stop a podcast. They dabble in podcasts. If you really want to get your message out, you want a consistent podcast that is, that at least is like every week, every other week. You want to see their audience. You can see how they're ranked. If they're in the top 1% globally, like Joe Rogan is 0.0001%. He's one of the top podcasters in the universe. So you can see who you're talking to as well. And that's going to give you a good idea if you want to pitch that podcast. And there's a lot of tools also, free tools also, where you can you can make a profile for yourself. The podcasters can go looking for you to court you to be a guest on their podcast. So thank you. I don't want to talk too much. So thank you though.
Well, thank you. And you talk about pitches, and I was thinking about I was doing a podcast for a while, and I was interviewing an acupuncturist, and we had to be, and she was great and not pitching me. And what I meant in that context was just that I didn't want to hear, her half off deal for acupuncture and, how much anything that sounds like a commercial, but the topic instead had to do with alternative medicine, holistic medicine. So as a business person, you can come in that door and say, hey, I just want to talk about, my knowledge about this particular topic, as opposed to taking the opportunity to try and get more clients or something like that. So it really has to do with kind of your own motivation. But like Julie said, a lot of times you're going to get the title underneath your face. Here's the owner, CEO of this company or whatever. So people are going to know who you are and how to get in touch with you. And usually people will allow you to give, oh, here's my website at the end of the program. But I wanted to move over to, before we open for Q&A, to Yuko, because Yuko and I go way back, but we use the term evergreen quite a bit, because certain topics are very time sensitive in that, okay, we're going to do a story about Thanksgiving. Well, you're going to do it in November, maybe late October, but you're not going to do it in January. So it's not evergreen, but evergreen is for us, and you can clarify this, Yuko, is something you can talk about 2 years from now and it's still just as relevant because it's like crime. You're talking about crime. You're talking about trafficking. There's a story that an interview I had done on KBCS like 2 years ago about Juneteenth. So every Juneteenth, Yuko will rerun that or rebroadcast that interview because the interviewer, the interviewee was a historian. So he was really just telling you what Juneteenth was as opposed to saying, come to this event, et cetera. But Yuko, why don't you talk about KBCS and how you deal with your stories and about archiving, how that's so important as well.
Well, I would say, just to slide into this, one thing, that, and Kevin talking about Juneteenth, thinking about timeframes for pitching something or, to send out a press release. So thinking about date pegs and awareness months and, awareness weeks, awareness days. Also, if there's something that's happening at the legislature around a particular topic that you're involved in, whether it be directly or indirectly, that kind of thing helps in when it gets to a newsroom, right? So that it's like, oh yeah, next month is that month. It'd be great, to cover this, or, oh, this sounds really interesting. Maybe doing a different kind of angle or something. So I think that really helps. With the stories that we do, we're kind of a small setup, right? So we tend to do stories that are not so newsy news, and more about people's personal experiences, and then things that they have been studying for a long time or something like that. So we'll often have a little longer interview on something, and then we will post it on our website, so it's as a blog post, so that it's there. People can have link do a social media post and say KBCS covered this and it's our story, put it out. So it's there for good. And we also refer back to stories that we had done a long time ago, just like Kevin said. We've aired the Juneteenth one a couple of times. We'll have, or if it's Juneteenth, we'll take a section out of the interview that Kevin did and then pair it up with something else that we do that's fresh. In fact, Rosette had done some stuff with KBCS over a decade ago, and we still pull out some of the old stuff that Kevin and Rosette have done. If it's about Indigenous experience, we might take a section of it and say that it had that it had gone out 15 years ago, and put it next to something that is current and has a similar. It might be something that passed recently, or something that is updated, right? And then be able to kind of put it side by side, right? So there's a lot of, if you have something that is about, say the experience of, sex trafficking, or experience of homelessness, or, something like that, those can be reused at our place anyway. And sometimes it's, say for instance, at KBCS, we'll do things like go out to, if say you have a speaker come and do I don't know, just something that came up earlier. Dave Nyward is going to be speaking in Everett. Say that KBCS might be able to go out there and record that with the permissions from all the parties to record and to broadcast. But then that can live for a while, and you can also use that recording in different ways with the permission of the people, of the speakers and the producers of the event and so forth. But it's just know that you can have something with a longer life. Also, you can do follow-ups to say, someone that we interview now, and then 10 months from now, we might want to do a follow-up and feature some of that same tape. So, and also, it's good to know that you can kind of use, if one place uses, creates a story, and then you can also, link to the story to show other places what's been done before. Usually I don't like to, take the same kind of story that everyone else is doing. I'll want to have an angle, but it's nice to see what other people are doing around a story as well. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
it gives
yeah.
us, I mean, it's all insight, and I think that you brought up something really important about evergreen stories, and that it provides context for ongoing issues. So, unfortunately, especially around race and social justice issues and trafficking and things like that, these problems have been with us for a long time. But if for certain people that are listening, it might be relatively new. Oh, I didn't know trafficking was so bad, or I didn't know that there was so much racial injustice still going on. So by providing an interview that was done sometimes 2 or 3, 4, 5 years ago, you get that historical context, and it really shows you just how significant the issue is. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there was for instance, we were able to interview Olivia Hooker, who was one of the last survivors of the Greenwood massacre in Oklahoma, Tulsa. And so she was 98 or 97 at the time. When she passed away, we aired it again. As there was the whole reparations thing that happened around that topic recently, we were able to use some of that interview again. There are those kinds of things are evergreen. Evergreen meaning that they last longer and they don't have a time frame, an end date necessarily.
Right. Before we go to Q&A, and I hope you have your questions ready, you can come off mic and turn your cameras on. I just wanted to ask Liz real quick. Would you mind, Liz, talking about the event? This is the plug, SABJ, that we're doing on October 21st.
Yes, I don't have as great of an announcer voice as you, but SABJ.
You're a heck of a roller skater.
Let's see. I guess we're a little under 2 weeks away from it, but on October 21st, that Saturday, from 4 to 5 p.m.
Right.
We have a wonderful panel that includes Lola Peters, who's here on the call, from South Seattle Emerald, Kat Bellamy Walker from Seattle Times, and Maiwa Aina from KNKX. And the theme of the event is Beyond the Byline. So we'll be doing a lot of digging into the journalistic process and kind of demystifying what really goes into a story before you see it on your screen or hear it on your radio or see it on your TV. And that event is going to be at the Rainier Arts Center. And tickets, I'll find the link real quick before we hop off here.
Yeah, that'd be
great. Drop the link to get tickets there.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. It's just so important. SABJ is one of the things that we do is get scholarships going for African American college students, high school students that want to enter into journalism, because again, there is a shortage, just like psychotherapy. I think 2% of all the psychotherapists are Black, but yet might be 30 to 40% of the clients. So just equaling things, tipping the scales, it just provides more perspective, more diverse perspective. And it's not just African Americans, but it's just getting more diversity in the media is so important. And I want to make sure that you might have some budding journalists right there in your organization. Don't be afraid to say, hey, you know, maybe I want to start a podcast. Maybe I want to do an editorial. Maybe I want to submit an idea for a story to the Emerald, that maybe you collaborate with another writer. There's so many avenues out there that to be taken advantage of. Questions from the audience. Who has questions? Questions. Who wants to? Joy Stevens, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin Henry, and to all the other esteemed reporters. So I do an annual conference, and I would love to have the media there. But often I have companies who one of the first questions they ask me is, will the media be there, before they accept my invitation to present? And I'm assuming they're asking that question because they may not say yes if the media is there. There's one company in particular who I had speak at an event, and they actually brought the PR person with them. And before anybody in the room could ask a question of him, of her, the PR person had to okay the question. So I'm just finding it really challenging to try to get, well, okay, first of all, I'm assuming that maybe somebody does want to cover it. I mean, that's kind of a big assumption in the first place. But it is about corporate giving and about how nonprofits rely on, I'm not pitching, I'm just explaining, and how nonprofits rely on the for-profit sector to help them with the work they're doing. Is there even a question in there? Yes, there is. Do you kind of get it, Kevin?
I'm gonna ask our panelists if they have any viewpoints on that. About, I mean, as a reporter, having been a reporter, I sometimes, you know, I think everybody has a role to play, and again, it's very relationship oriented. I mean, I remember even at the when I worked at the Daily News, we got, you know, quite honestly, put off by some PR firms for some clients they were pitching because the LA Times had the exclusive. And then 2 years later, they're coming back because the client's books weren't selling or the record albums weren't selling. And then all of a sudden they wanted us to do the interview, but we had long memories, so we were busy that day. So I think I would emphasize the relationship part of that. But do any of our panel, and I'll get to the other hands that are up, but any panelists have any ideas about that?
Could I weigh in?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think so. Jerry touched on this earlier a bit, but just like understanding that journalists have a different mission when we're going to cover something than the person who's, you know, coordinating the PR effort for a company does. And so I think, you know, as a journalist, like one of the first rules we learn is to never make promises that we can't keep. And so a lot of the time when we are going to these events, there will be some kind, like the event that you kind of described, like I would see that as being kind of more of like a source building mission for most journalists in my newsroom would go to that and see if something comes out of it. So I think a lot of reporters approach going places in that way versus like with the mindset that I'm going to leave here with this story. Because, you know, a lot of the time it really just depends on what you uncover when you go to an event and what you find out. And so I think the expectations probably need to be adjusted on the side of the PR folks, and just understanding the journalistic kind of think through on how we approach that kind of stuff. Because again, you know, and the second thing we learn in journalism school is that we're not there to be the PR machine's extension. And so,
Amen.
yeah, I think it's a balance as far as just like managing expectations and understanding how journalists think when it comes to covering those kinds of events.
Yeah, very well said. I wanted to get over to Leslie Brown. You're up.
Thank you, Kevin, and welcome and hello, everyone. I'm not a journalist. I'm a retired, ordinary person who lives in Edmonds, Washington, with extensive background and jumped into a lot of activism up here in Snohomish County. I'm part of the planning group for the upcoming community forum on hate and violent extremism. And Kevin, God bless his soul, has bravely stepped into the gap to lead us with our media. My question to all of you is, I kind of know the avenues to contact different media sources. What I don't know are the names, emails, and phone numbers of specific reporters and or the media sources that I should be choosing to best elevate this community event without necessarily using a shotgun approach.
Mm-hmm. Good question. Any comments from the panel?
I can start by just saying, Leslie, you're amazing. You're doing just wonderful work. I love to, it's just doing your research, right? Instead of just throwing spaghetti at a wall. And sometimes it is throwing spaghetti at a wall. And I believe journalists don't like to get the, you know, the template that they, you know, you're sending out to everybody. So make it really personalized, make it really short in your pitch. But I love to use Muckrack. And I did mention that in the notes.
Mm-hmm.
I did do a sample. Where's Jerry? I'm like, I'm going to look up Jerry Brewer on Muckrack. Dang, Jerry, you're famous. Come on. Like, let's all give him a round of applause. He's amazing. But you can look up his, I think it's the gold standard just in doing research for journalists. And you can find out like what they write about and have like say something that you actually read their last article. I actually pulled up Jerry's last article. Now I forgot about it, but hang on. I know he wrote about the Chicago Bears. I'm like, dang it. That was his article 9 days ago. I did see something about the Bears. So because I'm in Chicago, by the way. Yeah, so do the research. Chicago, you know, use Muckrack and make sure your pitch. And I think maybe Jerry and everybody else would be probably more versed in this, but make it really short, make it powerful, make it really quick, get our attention. Subject line, get our attention. Otherwise we get 1,000 different pitches all the time. But I'm just going to leave it there because I am not the expert. I think I'm amongst real experts.
Oh, no, you're an expert. But I just wanted to add that, Leslie, that I mean, when I send out releases, I do send them to the list, but I do, adjacent to that, target individuals who I've built relationships with. So at least I know they will read it and they will give me a quick yes or no on it, as opposed to, oh, well, it's been 3 weeks now and I've sent them, you know, 3 emails and nobody responds. So I think also researching, you know, what have they written about lately? Because sometimes I've had reporters say, well, that's a good story, but we just wrote about that 2 weeks ago. Or tying it into a larger story, like in the case of this event on the 26th, finding out maybe what incidents have happened in the Northwest, you know, hate incidents, and there's been plenty, and making sure that that's in your introduction email, because sometimes they might not be aware of just how bad it is in some places. But also just finding out, are people more phone call people? Are people more email people? But I know that takes time, but it's definitely worth the investment. And we can talk more about strategies anyway later, but I wanted to just get to Kai and then Sarah Ann. Go, where's Kai at?
Here I am.
There you are. All right, you're moving around my screen.
Sorry. Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm Kai Roberts-Frew. Among other things, I'm an author and a speaker on a topic regarding empowerment for trauma survivors. And my question is, once you find the people to contact, is more specifically about the format of how you address. Is it what's the format of email? Do you lead with the headline? Are you chatty? Are you just the facts man? What's a good way to reach reporters to get information without wasting their time?
Well, one thing before we get to the panel is the subject line is really important. I've seen emails that say news release or news release about event. That does not, but if it's something, and I don't mean controversial or shocking, but just something that I go, oh, I want to know more. I want to open this email. Make sure, what I always do is put the news release in the body, in the message box, as well as the attachment, because sometimes if you just get the attachment, it can't open, and then you can't read it at all because it won't open. Also, a little note of, hi, Mr. Jones, I just thought you might be interested in this. And then like Liz was saying, even a little note that I noticed that, 3 weeks ago you did this, and here's a follow-up on that theme or something like that. Response from the panelists though about that.
Yeah, I like a call to action in everything that you're trying to do. A little note. You've got your release and all that. I don't mind a release being attached or just below a personalized note. Sometimes it's as simple as like the subject line might be a great story for you, and then, hey, Jerry, I know you've written about such and such. Well, we've got this going on. Or sometimes the call to action might be, we've got this event. We're making a special invitation to you to attend. Not even necessarily saying, we're sending this release because we'd like you to write about it, but we're sending this because we'd like you to be here. Those are very effective with me, with someone who understands what my journalism is about, like what areas of interest I have, the things that I've been writing about, and here's something that can enrich you. And again, like, you have to think about the way journalists think. And this is why I'm saying a call to action, right? Like when we're trying to get sources, whether we're leaving them a voicemail or sending them an email, it's always a call to action. Hey, I'm writing about such and such. I'd like to talk to you about this, really quick, really succinct, very to the point, very much like personalized. This is why I need to talk to you, making people feel like they're the only person that has to tell their story. It's just a really powerful appeal.
Thank you.
I can add one more thing.
Oh yeah, please do. Thank you.
Like all this advice is really good. I love it, really. It's making me think about what I do. And I think another thing to think about is, even before you have to send something out, if you're trying to reach a journalist, like, think about what it is that you like when you are looking at a newscast, or you're listening to a radio piece, or you read something online. What is it about the piece that strikes you, right? And that's probably the thing that got the writer or the newscaster or the podcaster. That's the thing that got them. And so then when you reach out, try to find that nugget in the story you are trying to pitch, right? Try to find the gold that you heard or saw or witnessed somewhere else. Where's the gold inside the story you want other people to know about? And then that's the gold you pass on to the reporter. Because sometimes I read things and I'm like, oh, that is good. And sometimes it's like, oh, they're just kind of going through the motions here. Right. So just try to find the gold and share the gold with the reporter, because then they can share it with a broader community.
Thank you. That was great. Let's go over to Sarah Ann from Seattle.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for doing this. This has been really great. My name is Sarah Ann, and I am the program coordinator at Seattle Ops, which stands for Organization for Prostitution Survivors. I'm also sorry, my camera doesn't work. I don't know what's going on, but I am also a survivor, and I've done quite a bit of public speaking. My most recent thing was in Baltimore at the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court, and me and my daughter spoke there about our story and how the life or the game affects not only the survivor, but the whole family. Anyways, my question is, I love public speaking. I love my job. I'm very passionate about it. And I get very nervous. And so I'm just wondering about like maybe literature or TED Talks or anything like that that helps with my delivery and how I speak and how I can do it the best way I can. Like telling my story is the easy part because it's my story. I know it. So that part's not hard. But just being able, like Julia, I really liked the term you used, storyteller. I was like, hey, maybe that's what I am. Like, maybe I'm a storyteller. So I was just wondering on like things like that, like how I can better my craft and I do like a lot of the outreach stuff for ops. We're like really diving into our social media, and so I just want to present the best way I can. So if there's any like anything that would help me with that, I would really appreciate it.
Well, Sarah Ann, I'll be, and we know each other. I'll be happy to get you some resources and talk to you about that as well, because they're out there. But I can talk to you about that. I'll set up another meeting just between the two of us. But if some of the panelists have some suggestions, that would be great too.
Yes, Toastmasters. Join Toastmasters, Sarah.
Yeah, that's
okay. Toastmasters, you said?
Yep.
Okay.
It's amazing. If you are working on your public speaking skills and presentation, I mean, it's the gold standard and it's everywhere. Every city in the whole entire, I'm going to say world, but maybe just United States, I'm not sure, but join Toastmasters. That's going to help you tons. And you get, and it's practice.
Great suggestion. And we have time for a few more questions, but I wanted to go to Michelle Eastman. You're up.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Let me just see if I can get my video working.
Okay.
Oops. Hi. Hi. So I was wondering, so I work for a pretty small organization, and we haven't really done really good with our like PR in terms of and media relations. And I'm wondering, like, is it good to have relationships with the larger media as well as small media, or is it better to just maybe focus on the smaller media?
Well, I would say focus on all the media.
Okay.
Basically, but I would, like I said, when I first started this session today, it was when I first got to the city of Bellevue. They didn't have the smaller media or the quote ethnic media or any media besides the major media. So I think if anything, you want to maybe spend some extra time focusing on the smaller media. And the other thing is, and we talked about relationships, is sometimes a person in the smaller media, people move around. So I've had some great success with staying in touch with reporters who have gone from TV to print to radio and back again. So I would definitely focus on both, but some of it, sometimes you might have more of an emphasis on the smaller or certain media if it has a particular hook to it. If it's, if it's about, maybe it's about Asian hate or something, going on in the region, then definitely you want to talk to the Northwest Asian Weekly or the International Examiner or specific media, but you still do send the release to Cairo, King, or Como as well. But just remember that a lot of times I think the smaller, quote, smaller media will give you more attention and go in more depth. Even KBCS or KUOW might give you a 15, 20-minute interview versus, a minute on Cairo or something. Any other ideas from the panel about that?
I think it's important to remember how democratized, that's a word Julie rightfully used at the beginning, how democratized media has become. And so many other sources have been empowered. And this is someone who works for the Washington Post, and it's a dream gig and all of those things. But our mission is so broad. We're this national, international, Washington, sometimes it's hard to know what we're all about. I'll tell you this, and not just because so many great representatives of South Seattle Emerald are on this call, but this is as a Seattle Times alum. If you want South Seattle covered in a better, more dimensionalized way, you go to the Emerald versus the Seattle Times. Forget about the prestige, the perception of each publication. And so I think that's one thing to remember. It's really important also to remember when you're going to pitch things, like just coverage. Sometimes you can like if your goal is to be on the Today Show, every piece of media that is covered you counts, and it gives you kind of a credibility, and it gives you an online presence that you're being covered. I think that's important from the standpoint of getting more coverage. It's also for those that are trying to raise money for your organizations. The first thing that people do, right, when you're talking to them about their organization is you Google it, and you want to see like not just their website, but what other people have written about it. And so having just an intricate web, a network of people that have written about you at all levels from all angles is incredibly important. So nothing, take nothing for granted, and pitch to everybody. And so I'm telling you, like you read this great story that was in the Seattle Times, and a lot of times it started somewhere else, and it's just, I mean, and the Washington Post, so much of this great journalism we do started as local journalism in someone else's backyard. And here we are parachuting in and maybe given a higher altitude perspective on things, but that doesn't necessarily always suit your interest. So start where you can reach your arm out and then reach higher and higher and higher.
I like that. Thank you, Jerry. So we're going to go to Liz and Yuko, and then we have to wrap up, but you can contact me for more information, or I think a lot of people have put their emails in the chat, so I'll give you a little bit of time to, I can't figure out how to save the chat. So just, I'm copying and pasting things. But anyway, let's go to let's go to Liz first and then Yuko. Liz, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to say quickly, another approach, apart from like pitching a story that's particular to your organization, is if you have an area of expertise, or, there's someone on your staff who has an area of expertise, you can also pitch and reach out to reporters as an expert on that topic. And then by association, if you're featured in a story that may not actually be about your organization, but, elevates you as a representative of said organization, is also a way to approach getting coverage.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Liz. And last but not least, from Yuko Kodama.
Oh yeah. I really liked what Jerry was saying in terms of the think about all the different ways that that news organizations or public affairs organizations get their information out. So sometimes it's, headline, right? So really short. Sometimes it's like a longer interview, or it might be kind of more of a speaker, an expert kind of opinion. So think about all the different kind of, say that if you're working with a particular topic, think about the, say the personal experience of someone, the legislation that's going on maybe around it, other kind of issues that are going on around it. So for instance, if it's hate stuff, there's the recent hate crimes and the CID and things like that. And you can map things out and then identify different sources around these topics, right? So then you can reach out to the International Examiner if it was the CID, it's a hate crime kind of stuff, and what recently has been going on with the Seattle Police Department. And then you can also reach out to, and then depending on, you could go to, say, the Public News Service, because they do headlines, and they may take a particular aspect of this. You might go to, KBCS will do like more, say, personal experience. We might take an hour with someone because, we often work with people who aren't as experienced in public speaking. And so, we give them that space so that they can kind of flesh out their story. And then if there's certain experts, who are the experts around this? And then it kind of helps you understand and if you do the research around the media. I really appreciate how Jerry said that most of the stories that are out in Washington Post start from real small places. There was a thing that happened in Marysville. I mean, this didn't necessarily go huge, but Marysville, there were some students who were being threatened, Black students being threatened, and they had been trying to get help because they were afraid for their lives. They weren't getting the attention they needed. There was a small newspaper that covered it. Then from there, Converge covered it, and then KBCS, and I believe Seattle Times might have from there, and it just grew, and they got taken care of over time, with more attention. It is helpful, I think, to, look at reach out to everyone, but look at the different ways that you can reach out to different kinds of media. So really pay attention to the media landscape and pay attention to all of the different kinds of things that are going around that topic. And then, do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, last question is Leslie, real quick, because we have to shut it down.
Well, this is kind of a yes or no question. I don't really need a lot of information, but would the group, most of you professionals and experts, would you all agree that generally speaking, the media function should not be performed by consensus, but rather by an experienced media person designated for that role? Because we just tried to do some of our media by consensus, and it was catastrophic, as poor Kevin will tell you. Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yes, definitely. I think there's a balance. I think you want input, but somebody has to make a decision. And the thing is that, especially in our situation, there's not a lot of time. So if you've got 2 and 3 months to get something together, a media strategy or a plan, then you can take more input. But if you've got 3 weeks to get something out and you're already 3 or 4 weeks behind, then you really have to make some quick decisions. And then I think you go to the basics, the who, what, where, and why. You don't need to spend a lot of time talking about the way a quote sounds or whose name goes before somebody else's name and things like that, because actually the media doesn't even care. They're mainly interested in what's the focus of your event. The others, and you can always, if you really want to go into detail about names and sponsors and all this other stuff, then you can have a Facebook page and you can update it and do it all you want. But the news release is essentially, it's like a commercial. It's like Geico. It's like 55 seconds. Get to the point. Why should I buy this insurance? They don't care about what the Geico office looks like in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and things like that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does very well. Thank you.
Okay. With that, unfortunately, we have to run. But everyone has my email address. If you want to do another one of these, please let me know. And I'll be in touch with everybody, because I think I know just about everybody on the call, probably. And there's a few newcomers here. But thank you very much. And everybody, please have a great rest of the day, rest of the week. And I want to thank the panelists for taking time out. Your expertise and experience is extremely appreciated. And I look forward to, I'll be seeing a lot of you anyway. So thanks again. Take care.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
That was fun. Good job.
Thank you.
Kevco.